In Iraq, the British and their tribal allies are hopelessly outnumbered by the well-equipped Iraqi army. When the Iraqis officially announce an alliance with Germany, a British-German showdown is inevitable. After days of rising tension, British families are evacuated to Habanaya Airfield, 60 miles from Baghdad, from where they are to be flown out of Iraq. At Habanaya, there are almost 2,500 British servicemen and civilians. The only aircraft they have are obsolete training planes with student pilots. Around the base are massed 5,000 Iraqi troops with heavy artillery. The Iraqis refuse to let anyone in or out.
Well, initially the British capabilities were very limited because they only had training aircraft which included a few Elsley fighters at Habanaya.
The British know they need to take decisive action to save the base at Habanaya and the British presence in Iraq. They decide to attack without warning. For the British, it is a race against time. If the Iraqis can persuade the Germans to send combat aircraft to join the battle, it will be all over for the British in Iraq. April 1941. News of the pro-German coup in Iraq quickly reaches Berlin, but Adolf Hitler pays no attention. He is preoccupied with his plan to invade the Soviet Union, the greatest risk of his career. With the Führer showing little interest in the Middle East, it falls to von Ribbentrop to see Iraq as a historic opportunity. He orders an immediate study of the ways in which Germany can help the Iraqis. One thing is clear: any help will have to be sent by air. Eventually, von Ribbentrop gets Hitler's permission to supply the Iraqis with money and arms. But what Amin al-Husseini and the Iraqis want most from the Germans at this crucial point is not weaponry or even money, but air support from the Luftwaffe. The British are about to go on the offensive at the Habanaya Air Base, 60 miles outside of Baghdad. Time is everything.
The British acted remarkably quickly. They ceased flying training at Habanaya and formed all the training aircraft there, together with the instructors and the most promising of the pupil pilots, into an air striking force.
Although few of the pilots have ever flown a combat mission, they are thrown into action regardless of the risks. In May 1941, the British aircraft launched ferocious bombing and machine gun attacks on the Iraqi artillery positions. The British plan is to eviscerate the Iraqi artillery with air attacks by the Habanaya Squadron, joined by heavy bombers based nearby. In a two-pronged attack, infantry raids keep the Iraqis off balance, while the RAF widens its operations, attacking Iraqi air bases and wiping out the Iraqi Air Force. At the same time, in one of the boldest transport operations of the whole war, British civilian aircraft fly 400 troops from India to the Iraqi city of Basra, a distance of 1,500 miles. Their mission is to reinforce a march on the Iraqi capital, Baghdad.
The British Air Forces, both within Habanaya and from the surrounding areas, attacked so strongly that within a week the Iraqi troops had given up their positions and were retreating on Baghdad in some confusion.
After 6 days of fighting, the British drive the Iraqis away from the Habanaya air base and break the siege. The retreating Iraqis leave behind large quantities of supplies and weapons, but the battle for control of Iraq has just begun. Reinforced by their captured artillery, the British march on the Iraqi city of Fallujah. But by now, the Grand Mufti and the Iraqi leaders are at last getting help from the Germans.
They sent in a small air contingent, which effectively involved 7 bombers, 12 long-range fighters, and some transport aircraft and their support crews, and a single unit of Italian biplane fighters. And that was the extent of the Axis support when it actually came to it.
Although the Germans fly a large number of missions bombing and machine gunning British columns and the Habanaya airfield, the attacks achieve little. They are never coordinated with Iraqi troops on the ground and manage to destroy only a handful of British aircraft. In spite of German airstrikes, the British fly in reinforcements to the base and prepare to launch an attack on Baghdad. British aircraft attack the German bases at Mosul, Kirkuk, and Rashid, destroying 20 aircraft. After capturing Fallujah, the British launch a determined attack on the Iraqi capital. It's over before it starts. On May 31st, 1941, the Iraqis sue for peace. The defeat of the uprising by the British is a major disaster for the Iraqis. All over the Arab world, the news is greeted with dismay. The British will keep Iraqi oil and their strategic bases, but they have inflicted a humiliation on the Iraqis and the Arab world that will reverberate down the years. One of the Iraqi army officers captured by the British is Khairallah Tulfa, the uncle and foster father of Saddam Hussein.
The British reinvaded and reoccupied Iraq, overthrew the government of Rashid Ali al-Gailani, chased out and hunted down many of the conspiratorial young army officers, and then instigated a major purge of the Iraqi army officer corps. And Saddam Hussein's uncle, Khairallah Tulfa, was one of the victims of that purge in the sense that he was dismissed from the armed forces and thereafter lived a rather embittered life.
In later years, Saddam Hussein will hear again and again the story of his uncle's imprisonment, his harsh treatment, and the disastrous failure of Iraq's uprising against the imperialist British enemy. Although the British defeat the pro-Nazi coup in Iraq, and Rommel's campaign to capture the Middle East ends in disaster at the Battle of El Alamein, the alliance between the Grand Mufti Amin al-Husseini and Nazi Germany is far from over. He escapes from Iraq to Berlin. If the British and the Jews can't be defeated in the Middle East, the Grand Mufti means to ensure they are defeated in Europe.
When the coup d'etat failed in 1941, the Mufti could not stay in Baghdad. Had he stayed, he would have been arrested. So he went to Berlin. He was there like a statesman.
In Berlin, the Mufti will soon prove his value. Before the war is over, he will create his own Muslim SS units, launching a reign of terror whose atrocities will become a byword for cruelty and barbarism.